6 o'clock, so we'll make a start. I'd like to welcome all councillors, speakers and visitors to this meeting of Community Environment Committee. We haven't got a fire alarm test planned, so if there is an alarm, please make for that door. Follow me and we're out to the car park. Yeah, I would remind everyone that the meeting is webcast, and I am informed that we have as many as 150 viewers, you know, so we're not alone. It's worth thinking about. And for planning, apparently, we've had as many as nearly 500. So that's good news. Okay, so we'll start on the agenda. Agenda item 1, apologies and substitutes, please.
Yes, Chair, we have no apologies tonight.
Thank you. Item 2 is approval of minutes of the previous meeting. Does anybody wish to move that? Second?
I'll second, Chair. Yeah.
All in favour?
Unanimous.
Thank you. Next item is public participation, and we have 2 speakers. So if the speakers can come to the chair on the table in front and turn on the microphone. First speaker is Ms. Victoria Friend of Roseley Parish Council. Thank you. You have 3 minutes, and we'll give you 30 seconds warning before 3 minutes is finished.
Okay. Members of the committee, the need for an official traveller site in the Derbyshire Dales has been ongoing for far too long. In the update for this meeting, it is stated that the Traveller family currently occupying land in Roseley submitted a homelessness application in November 2018. In fact, this same family had already declared themselves homeless in 2012. The corporate committee of this council was told that there were no suitable district council sites on the 13th of December 2012 after a thorough search had been undertaken. Yet it was deemed necessary to carry out another thorough search this year. How much land has the district council acquired in the last 7 years? While this 2012 search was ongoing, a planning application was made for a temporary site on land behind Old Station Close car park in Roseley. This application was granted on the 25th of March 2013 on the condition that the site must only be utilised for a period of 9 months from the date of first occupation, and it was explicitly stated in the decision notice signed by Paul Wilson that at the end of 9 months the site should be cleared of all residential caravans, vehicles and other ancillary structures related to the use. The first occupation began as soon as the land had been prepared, and therefore the planning permission for traveller occupation of this land at Roseley lapsed early in 2014. Since then, no further planning applications have been made for traveller occupation of this land. As you know, in April this year, the Travellers reoccupied the same site in Roseley and were provided with resources by the District Council, including temporary fencing, bins and portable toilets. No planning application has been made in the 6 months that the Travellers have been in Roseley. The agenda for this meeting makes reference to approval of the continued provision of a temporary tolerated site on the land. I find it extremely worrying that the council is supporting an occupation that goes against the conditions explicitly detailed in 2012 in a way that deliberately avoids the need for consultation, particularly with local people and businesses. So I asked the council explicitly, and I did record this question in advance, why was temporary planning permission needed for the occupation in 2012 but is deemed to not be needed in 2019? Finally, in conclusion, I want to stress that these travellers need a permanent site, and 7 years is too long for time and resources to be spent without resolution. I would urge the council to resolve this issue as soon as possible
30 seconds left.
And return the car park in Roseley to its proper, much needed use. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Friend. Second speaker is Mr. Richard Bean, local resident and business owner.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you, Chair and committee members, for allowing me this opportunity to speak. I'm the owner of Natural Stone Sales, and my business and home is located on Old Station Close in Roseley. I also speak on behalf of myself and family and residents, as residents and business owner, but also the other 7 businesses that occupy the site, namely Turner's Arts, Peak Tractors, Igloo Furniture, TW Autos and MOT Centre, Tyre Specialists and TC Harrison, and finally the Level Centre, which is a facility for learning mentally handicapped people. Parking on the site is a major daily problem, as understandably people are worried about leaving their cars unattended on a traveller site, so they now leave their cars on the service roads, which causes major problems for stock deliveries coming to the site, which is often on large lorries, and access is obstructed by these parked cars. The people living on the site are generally unsupervised, and large amounts of garden waste have been dumped and since cleared away by the council at huge cost to the taxpayer. Fly tipping is a serious criminal offence, yet these activities are being ignored and the perpetrators have just been allowed to get away with it. Since this large amount of waste has been cleared, more waste arrives daily, which is burnt on large fires in the evenings when most people have vacated the site. This is also clearly an illegal practice. I have written several months ago to Mr Tim Braund at the council complaining of all these activities, yet I've not even had including actually large amounts of human waste in the car park, soiled tissue, toilet tissue paper, which is in the car park and public footpath adjacent to the Derwent. I've not received any reply from Mr Tim Braund or even the courtesy of an acknowledgement. It's also known that these residents are claiming benefits, but very obviously working locally doing garden work and tarmacking, tree work, etc. This is clearly illegal. Why is no one looking into it? Any general public would normally be investigated for working while claiming benefits. Can the council please confirm that all these vehicles associated with the site
30 seconds.
Are fully legal in terms of tax, MOT and insurance? Other visitors to the site need assurance that they are covered in case they are involved in any accident where their vehicles may be damaged by the occupants of the site. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Bean. Thank you to both speakers. Next item, number 4, is interest, declaration of interest. I declare interest on item 7. I'm a shareholder in Persimmon, which is due to build houses in Darley Dale, and I'm also a director of the Bakewell Community Land Trust, which I think will be mentioned in the report, on item 7. So I will leave the room at that stage.
Chair, can I declare a personal interest in item 7 again? The funding requirements take in a project at Worksworth involving the Community Land Trust there, and I am a trustee, but it is only a personal interest as such.
That's fine. Any other interests? No? Thank you. Move on to item 5. We have, I understand, no questions from members. Is that correct? Yeah. So we'll move on to item 6, Gypsies and Travellers. Tim, please.
Thank you, Chair. As we've heard from the speakers, this report is about the ongoing situation in relation to a family of travellers located within the area, currently sited on a temporary site at Roseley. The main purpose of this report is to update the committee about the work that's been done to try and identify a suitable site that could be used to house the family on a permanent basis. You might remember at the last meeting that we discussed this issue, we talked about some work we've done by engaging a consultant to go and look around areas of land that might be suitable and approach the landowners and see if there was any chance of them wanting to talk to us in relation to creating a traveller site. That work's been ongoing behind the scenes since the meeting and has boiled down eventually to one site, where a site in private ownership, where the landowner is interested in talking to the council about future use of the land for a potential traveller site. At this stage, that landowner has asked for his details and the details of the site to remain confidential. Nothing's been agreed with him, and he'd rather carry out those negotiations before going public. What the report asks for is for authority to be delegated to me to continue to negotiate with the landowner and his agent, and to agree a form of heads of terms which we could then bring back to committee as soon as possible to discuss the next step about developing that land, if that is still possible when we go through those negotiations. That's the main purpose of this report, to get authority to continue to talk to the landowner with the idea of forming a permanent site. The report discusses the two other sites that have been before this committee previously, the one at Roseley and the one at Wirksworth. And you'll see from the comments in there that both those sites are considered not as suitable for development as a permanent site as a site that we found in the private ownership. So that's where officers think we need to be working now in terms of negotiating with that landowner and hoping to bring that site forward, at which point all that information will become public. The report goes on to talk about what we do with the travellers in the meantime, because they have to be somewhere. And the report recommends that those travellers be allowed to remain on the site at Roseley until February, which is when we're expecting to come back before committee. There's also a section in the report about proposed works to the car park at the Agricultural Business Centre, and you can see in there that that site has become more used as a stopping place for people passing through. We're not particularly talking about the family at Roseley there, we're talking about travellers moving through the district. And we're suggesting what's happened in that report, what's happened in regard to that car park, is that our colleagues in Environmental Services have been talking to the Bakewell Agricultural and Horticultural Society, the showground, and work on developing the plans there has been taken on by the showground, by BAS. So that's the gist of the report. There are a couple of questions asked by the speakers. In relation to, are the vehicles legal? Well, I don't know the answer to that. The police are the people who deal with that. I am meeting with the Inspector of Police tomorrow, and I'll raise that question with him. As regards the site there, previously when the site was planned to be used, it was planned that the travellers would be moved to that site in 2012, and permission was obtained before that happened. Members might remember that in actual fact, when we were recommending where the travellers went to next, when we moved them from Matlock Bath, the Roseley site was not suggested. We were talking about moving them to the site in Wirksworth, and we did not expect the travellers to go to Roseley at that time, which is why no advance work was done in that respect. I entirely take on board the comments of Mr. Bean in relation to the businesses on the industrial estate, who have been very tolerant with issues that have gone off there. I and officers in environmental health have received a number of calls from businesses, and I think without exception all those calls have been constructive. People have done their best to help, but they have undoubtedly been inconvenienced by the travellers there. Members will be interested to know that in addition to the family on the back of the car park there, the site has been occupied by a number of other travellers who have turned up, some of whom are known to the family and some of whom are not. And there have been problems with fly tipping. We aren't doing nothing about that. We have investigated complaints of fly tipping, and members who've been on the committee a long time will know we have a pretty good history of prosecuting people for fly tipping. And we've got to the point basically where if we were going to find any information to enable us to take successful prosecution, we were going to have to do some covert surveillance. Extended conversation, basically we evicted some travellers from the front of the site, and the tipping decreased a lot. We have become aware of the issue of burning of waste on site, and that is now being investigated. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Tim. Councillor Purdy.
Thank you, Chair. No questions, but if I may, I'd just like to elaborate on the fact that I'm going to move the recommendations just for the benefit of the public. I think we need to remind ourselves that we thought we'd cracked this permanent site 3 years ago when we approved planning application at Water Lane at Ashbourne. But unfortunately, that land was owned by the County Council, and whilst we were near to agreeing as of terms of service, the new administration decided that that route was for the bypass, so that was removed. Since becoming leader, my first leader's announcement was that number one priority was to find a permanent site. And so I'm really pleased with the progress that's been made, and thank Tim for all his hard work and the efforts of the consultancy firm that we've employed, that it appears that we have come up with an appropriate site. There's still some hoops to go through, and I fully respect the owner with his wishes not to yet go public. That's quite right, because unfortunately wherever these people camp, either legally or illegally, nobody in that vicinity wants them. because they bring certain issues which the public quite rightly can't accept. We do our best as an authority to keep on top of that by cleaning sites. So I'd hope you bear with us, please, because we really are very close to securing this permanent site. And I think it's quite appropriate that we give officers delegated approval to continue with the dialogue with that owner in the hope of a successful conclusion. And then, of course, a report would be brought back to this committee. So I move the recommendation with those comments, Chair.
Councillor Froggatt.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm quite happy to second the report. It's solid and it just brings everything up to date. Thank you.
Councillor Swindell.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try not to cough my way through this. Can I just ask a few questions, Chair, and I may reserve the right to come back for comments later. My first question is in regards to the potential new site, and I know you obviously can't say too much or give too much away at the moment, but just for my own education, when we're looking at a new site, are we looking at buying it, renting it? Are you able to tell us anything about that, just for my own education on that point, please?
Chair, it's quite good to answer questions one at a time. Thank you for that. That's part of the conversation. At this stage, the owner has indicated that he's willing to talk about leasing the site. We also want to talk to him about potentially buying the site, and that will be part of the report that will come back before committee.
Okay.
Chair, sorry, I've just got.
Okay.
I won't try not to take too long with them. With regards to the current site that the Travellers are on, can you tell me who owns it, please?
The Roseley site's owned by the District Council.
Thank you. With a view to moving them on in February, we've given a timescale till February and they'll come back to this committee, which I'm assuming will be with a view to either moving them on or keeping them there. I'm going to assume, as well as negotiations for the new site, we will be in that time looking for another potential temporary site in case there are continued issues at Roseley.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, we will. Without giving away all the negotiation, part of the talks will be about whether we could move the family onto the proposed site before developing it. There is plenty of room for that to be done, as some members will recall. If we're developing a permanent traveller site, it's more than just putting caravans on a piece of land. There is some development to go on in relation to that. However, we could, if we were able to proceed with negotiations quickly, we could look to get them on the site before we carry out that development. It might, well, we believe it will be more amenable to them as well as to the community. We will continue to look for temporary sites. Members will know that there is a limit on those. We don't have anywhere that's perfect. If we did, we would be using it.
Finally, Chair, just on that point, I know we were looking at the site in Wirksworth. I mean, I'm assuming we'll be looking at that again because that was something we looked at and they chose not to go there. So I'm assuming that will be looked at as a potential site. My last question is, we're told we've got families on there that aren't the family that we have a duty of care for. What are we doing about those families? And the reason I ask is I don't want us to set a precedent where we don't do anything about it, because when we get a permanent site, I don't want Derbyshire Dales to be seen to be the soft touch where we can just roll up alongside the other families and we'll be sort of left to get on with our business.
We've carried out 2 evictions on the site. Combination of my environmental health team and Leeds legal team do that work. Both evictions have been successful and we'll carry on doing that. Where there are people who have no reason to be there in our terms, then we will do that.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Ratcliffe.
Thank you, Chair. I have 3 questions, if I may, but just a brief introductory comment, if you like. It seems to me the underlying message that's emerging from the speakers, indeed perhaps from ourselves as well, and the report, is that this really has gone on far too long. So I'm really encouraged by the news that a site is emerging. you know, maybe it's not just Brexit that needs to get done, it's the travellers situation too. So I'm really pleased that we have this news coming forward. Just in respect of this new site, could I ask if you can give me an answer, is this new site sufficient to provide fulfilment of all the local plan requirements, or is it just to provide a permanent site for the family present at Roseley?
One of the good things about the site is it is big enough to meet all the local plan requirement.
Right. That leads me to the second question, which is slightly rhetorical, if you like. I'd like to see at some point a budget being produced that encompasses purchase of the land, development of the land, all the associated infrastructure requirements, and indeed the clean-up of Roseley. I have a feeling that it's more than we originally set aside in our financial considerations a year or so ago. So I'd like to see that, if that could be produced, just to give us an overview, and no doubt we shall want to give approval for that.
Okay, I can answer that as well, Chair. So all members know the council a couple of years back set aside £10,000 for design costs in relation to a site when we were looking at Watery Lane in Ashbourne. That would just be sufficient to design the site. That wouldn't be sufficient to develop it. The cost of buying, leasing and developing would be more than that. And I would be looking very closely at my colleague Rob. He knows I'm going to say it, is he, before I even speak. I'll be looking very closely at Rob, who's our housing expert, who has access to contacts for grant funding at Homes England, and Rob would be doing the work to make that come forward. We certainly will be presenting a budget.
You said more or less exactly what was on my mind, the consideration for applying for funds to complete this project. My third question comes back to what my colleague, Councillor Colin has just mentioned. I've been empowered, if that's the right word, to ask this evening what is the situation with the Worksworth site. As you all know, when this site was set aside, there was extreme disquiet amongst town council members and indeed the community about its proximity to what is a community recreation leisure area, and the access to that site. And as you probably know, I know you will, concrete blocks were laid across the car park area to prevent access into primarily Stony Wood itself. Now they, of course, are an embarrassment because they mean that visitors to that site have to park on Middleton Road, which is a hazard in itself. The sooner this is resolved so that Worksworth can get back to its normal functioning in respect of Stony Wood, the better. When can I expect to hear this?
Okay, well, I think it's worth saying that those sentiments are probably echoed by the people and the traders of Roseley, and by the people of Matlock, Bath and Bakewell and the various other places that the encampments have occurred. So I don't think Worksworth special in that respect. No. There is no official designation in relation to Worksworth that says it's a temporary tolerated site or it's got permission, but it is a site that in theory could be used by the travellers. You can draw your own conclusions from the fact that when they were directed to use that site, they chose to go somewhere else instead. They clearly don't like that site, and so don't see it somewhere that's suitable for their needs. And I have some sympathy with them in that respect. The local community won't welcome them there because, as Councillor Purdy said earlier, very rarely do local communities welcome a traveller site. I think the situation, if I can be honest, Chair, is that it can only really be sure that they won't go there when the permanent site is found and they move on to it.
Yeah. Chair, if you just allow me, I just want to say one final thing. This, despite all our frustrations, is an extremely difficult situation to resolve. Otherwise, I'm sure it would not have gone on for so long. But I think credit should be paid to Tim and his team for the work that they're doing. It's very easy to criticise. Sometimes, I think we should give praise where praise is due. And I think Tim and his team, in trying to maintain good relationships with Rosalie, addressing all the other things that have come along, I think have done well.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Burfoot.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I share members' frustration about this ongoing problem, long-standing problem, in fact, and also echo what Councillor Ratcliffe just said in terms of congratulating our officers, particularly Tim Braun and his team, in the work that they've done on this matter. But in terms of the Rosalie, temporary site at Rosalie, obviously that's totally unsatisfactory at the moment, and if there's garden and other waste being tipped and so on, I'm wondering what enforcement there is of that, and whether there's permanent, if you like, investigation and checking on site as to what the problems are, and do our staff actually clear up the site on a regular basis? That's the first question.
Okay, yes. Well, fly tipping is an issue that we investigate wherever it occurs and whoever causes it. And if there's evidence to show exactly who's undertaken that fly tipping, then we do take action. Some couple of years back, together with Erewash Borough Council and Amber Valley Borough Council, we took a joint prosecution for a fly tipper who was tipping around the 3 district council areas. In the end, he pleaded guilty to 9 of the 10 charges. I don't know why he didn't plead guilty to the 10th. And he actually received a custodial sentence. So we do go down those routes, and we have some degree of success. We always publicise those successes as well, to encourage the others, as they say. In relation to this particular incident, there was fly tipping of green waste, tree waste on the site, and officers engaged in overt surveillance, which is what they're allowed to do in their day-to-day jobs. So they arrived at site, and they observed what was happening in plain view of the travellers on site. It became clear after a period of time that we weren't going to find out exactly who was doing it by undertaking that activity. As you might imagine, our officers are known to the travellers as the travellers are known to the officers. We got to the stage of looking to obtain authorisation under the Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act, which is more difficult to say than you'd think. And at the same time, we were taking action to evict the travellers who we believe were mainly responsible for it. The eviction came through before we got the RIPA authorisation. We have become aware subsequently of some activities on site, as was alluded to earlier, which are a less invasive form of fly tipping, but nevertheless is an illegal waste activity. That's now subject to investigation in the same way. Obviously, I don't want to say too much about that because it is a criminal investigation, and officers do undertake these things.
Right, next question is to do with the permanent, or the possible permanent site which is being investigated at the moment. I know Councillor Ratcliffe asked a question about the local plan requirements and so on, but does that take into account the long-term local plan requirements? I think it's 9 pitches by 2033, the end of the plan period. Is it capable of taking that sort of capacity?
Yes, it is. We're very pleased with the size of the site. The landowner's concerned it might be more than we need, but we believe it meets our needs for local plan requirements and also potentially for a site to which we can direct itinerant travellers.
Okay. And the third question, and the last question you'll be pleased to know, what further investigation has been carried out in terms of control barriers to prevent the abuse, if you like, of district council car parks and other district council land? It has been mentioned at previous debates about this on this subject. So wondering what further work's been done.
Well, I can comment in relation to the Agricultural Business Centre because that's what's in the report. As members may recall, car parking, thankfully, is one of the things that I'm not responsible for. That work is ongoing with others and will be reported back in due course. But it'll be for others to do, not me.
Councillor Wakeman. Oh, sorry, I beg your pardon. Councillor Borley.
Yes, I was just going to come on to the barrier system at Matlock Bath and the fact that it's not included. We have only got 5 recommendations and not 6. So I just wondered, I knew that we were having further discussions about the barriers, but I wondered why it wasn't included in a recommendation that we continue looking at that. Because I'd like to have it noted that we are continuing to look at it, even though I've been at some of the meetings where it's been discussed. You'll be aware at the moment that the group that were at Roseley, I think it's the same people, have now moved on to Matlock Bath Station car park, so we can expect them to start chopping trees down and doing things like that, whether, if it is them that's doing it, as happened last time they were there. So I'm just really aware that we need some barrier situation to, even if we get a permanent site, we're going to have travellers who turn up who are not going to go onto the permanent site, just going to go wherever they like. So we need a barrier system. So the question is, why is it not included on the recommendations?
Chair, if I could come back on part of that, as I can't really comment on the car park barrier system because that's not a piece of work I'm involved in. But in relation to the travellers currently at Matlock Bath, yes, they are the travellers who were evicted from Roseley and from the Agricultural Business Centre, and we are taking action to evict them from Matlock Bath. Colleagues in legal, Lee, next to me, has already got a court date for next week, so we'll be going down the possession order route and seeking an order that prohibits them from returning in the usual way. Any action we see in relation to fly tipping on site we'll deal with in the same way as well. And if any members or any members of the public are able to give us definitive evidence, we'll look to take action in respect of that information as well.
Yeah, I just have there's no limit on the number of questions, as long as if you give me some indication when you start, how many you've got, that would be helpful.
I only had that one, but I just want to come back.
Okay.
So we'll be getting a further update, because this is the Gypsies and Travellers update. We'll be getting a further update on the barriers then. Will that come under the auspices of what you do, Tim, or will it be Ash? We'll be getting a further update.
Ash would like to come in on this one, I think.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, as you're aware, it's a piece of work that we have been looking into. We've considered a number of options and we're aware of the costs. What we are doing now is looking at the practicalities of those, and we'll be presenting it as part of possibly a capital programme discussion in later weeks.
Thank you.
Councillor Wakeman, it is you now, sorry about that.
Yes, I'd like to congratulate you on finding this site as well. Have we got a rough timescale if this site is okay?
Not in totality, no. The rough timescale is that I'll be in touch with the landowner's agent tomorrow. I'm seeing the Traveller family on Friday, and then everything will flow from there. We hope to progress discussions on heads of terms, which is only the start of the process, very speedily. We know there's a desperate need to get them, to get the site up and running as soon as we can.
Councillor Purdy.
Thank you for letting me come in back, Chair. I think there's a couple of points I really want to raise, and one is that, yes, we have got the travellers on Matlock Bath, so we've got that problem again. And I was present with Councillor Mrs Pawley with discussions with Bosselthwaite and another officer, I can't remember his name, forgive me, with regard to security at Matlock Bath. I have to say it is a difficult site to secure. I'm an expert in that field, and even I can see it's difficult, but there's not to say we shouldn't look into it. So you'll hear, as you've heard from Ash, we are looking into it. The other fact that's not been mentioned is that this authority is between a rock and a hard place. What's not been mentioned is the consideration of human care for this owner's family. We have a duty of care, and whilst I've said nobody wants them, somebody has to look after them, and the fact is that they're happy to be at Roseley at the moment in the knowledge that we are vigorously pursuing this potential site. And the third point is in reference to Councillor Ratcliffe's question on finance. If I may remind you that when I had discussions with Councillor Barry Lewis, leader of Derbyshire County Council, shortly after I became leader with Councillor Hobson and the Chief Executive Mike Ashworth, we managed to secure from them a promise of monies, and I will chase it.
Councillor Wayne.
Thank you, Chair. We've heard the comments from the two people from Roseley, and I don't know whether this goes to you, Tim, or whether it goes to Ash, but obviously there's been a lot of turmoil down there with car parking and things like that. Can you confirm that once it's remedied, hopefully, down at Roseley, that will be considered for the relevant barriers, so that they're not going to get a repeat of what's gone off now?
there are a number of options, Councillor Wayne, in terms of barriers. I think we need to consider what's appropriate for the car parks that are affected, and obviously the practicalities of financing that.
Can I just come back quickly?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, obviously it's the district council land, and we are protecting our own asset if we do that. Can you just confirm, is it in your plan or not, consideration at the present time? Thank you.
The considerations have been for the method of barrier systems. There are quite a number on the market. That's what we have been reviewing. We're aware of car parks that are impacted by this, and they'll all be considered in a round of review. But the work that officers have been doing, as previously reported, was to look at different methods of trying to protect those car parks.
Thank you.
Councillor Gamble.
My question hopefully is quite an easy one. And firstly, I did want, again, reiterate other people's comments. Really well done to Tim for getting this site. I have had a chat, and it does seem as if this site is really going to meet the family's needs, which I think is really very important. And so really my question is how quickly do we think we can get them on a temporary basis on this site? Because obviously they'll be happier there.
Thank you, Chair. It does say in the report, I have visited the site with Dr. Spencer from the Derbyshire Gypsy Liaison Group, and she, as their representative, is very pleased with it. It works very well in a number of ways for meeting their particular needs, as some members will know, and probably some members of the public will know. They do have significant welfare needs, and the site's good in that respect. It's in a good location as well, and everything else. So I'm going to be talking to the landowner's agent tomorrow, and we'll be setting up a meeting as soon as all parties are available, and we'll start the conversation going about heads of terms. We understand that he's very happy to listen to offers from us, so that's a good starting point. I'll be seeing the family together with Dr. Spencer on Friday to talk about their needs, and one of the things I would like to talk about early in both those conversations is an early move onto the site prior to development. There is enough room on the site to enable us to do it in that way.
That's brilliant.
Councillor O'Brien.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think we all wish well in negotiations for a permanent site, but I do think, however difficult it may be for us, that the committee owes the Roseley Parish Council an answer to the questions they raised earlier, and that is the precise planning status of the current planning status of the site at Old Coach Road car park. And the question I'm asking is what is the current planning status, and if for whatever reason the negotiations are slower than expected, is the council proposing to regularise the planning situation at Roseley?
Thank you, Chair. The planning situation at Roseley is there isn't a current planning permission in respect of their occupation. It's a conversation I have with our development manager on a fairly regular basis, and the situation is the longer it goes on for with them occupying the site there, the more fidgety he will become about the need for a planning application to be submitted. At the moment, we're happy with the intention of aiming for February. If it goes on beyond that, we'll have to review that situation. But you're quite, Roseley Parish Council are quite correct, there isn't a current planning permission there.
Councillor Wakeman.
Just a quick one. When the new site opens, will there be a blanket order on the other sites, or can't we do that?
No, there won't be a blanket order on the sites. Despite the regularity of this item's appearance at committee, we don't actually have lots and lots of traveller encampments in the area. We have one family who are somewhere in the district pretty much permanently, and then we have a small number of itinerant encampments through the district as well. Other authorities who've gone for injunctions to prohibit travellers from occupying sites across the whole of the district have either named individual families who've caused lots of problems or have had huge numbers, hundreds of encampments a year. We're not in that situation. What we will be able to do, though, is if this particular family who are able to occupy a permanent site appear elsewhere, we'll be able to direct them back to their permanent site immediately.
Any further questions or comments, please? Councillor Swindell.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to come back with another question as well, but the microphone doesn't
That's
like
fine.
But Councillor O'Brien's asked that question about the planning permission. It is a little bit uncomfortable that we haven't got any. I mean, I don't know where that leaves us legally, but I don't know if you can address that finish. But I mean, I'm struggling on how to vote. It's very difficult, and I'm kind of addressing Roseley Parish Council and the residents there as well, because nobody wants to sort of put that kind of misery on local businesses or people around. But if I was to vote to say, let's move them, the question is, where do they go? Where do we move them to? And I'm not in a position to know what is available, what is suitable, and where they can go. And I also feel that sort of Roseley have had their fair share in a way. You know, Matlock Bath had their fair share and how much they could take. We moved them on. Have Roseley now had theirs? Would it be right for us to try and find an alternative place? That is where my dilemma is. I'm happy to vote for the report for the update and the progress for the new site, which I'm sure we've all got our fingers crossed, our toes crossed and everything crossed for. And I'm sure Councillor Purdy will have our full support if that site comes forward to hopefully put this issue to bed. But with regards to how I'm going to vote, I will vote for it, and it's no pleasure in putting the businesses on the site through any further torment. But come February, I will be sort of looking at, you know, sort of saying, you know, Roseley's had its fair share, we need to move them on. But for now, I'm between a rock and a hard place, as many of us are, because where do we move them to? Thank you, Chair.
I have no other people listed down to speak. It has been moved and seconded. All in favour?
Unanimous, I think.
Unanimous.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm now going to pass over to the Vice Chair to do item 7.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Committee.
I think so. I'm not sure, but I think so. Oh, really? I'll try it.
Right, thank you. Item 7, Affordable Housing Development Programme, report of the Head of Housing. I think, are you taking this one, Isabel? Thank you.
So my name is Isabel Coggins. I'm the Rural Housing Enabler. I work in the housing team of the council. So my report today is a request for capital funding for a number of schemes that we're working on with housing associations and community land trusts and almshouses. And the request is for just over £2.2 million. As you'll be aware, and as we've spoken about at previous committees, we have a number of private developers developing housing where we've had affordable housing provided on site as part of our agreement with them. On some of these sites, they've provided off-site financial contributions for us to ensure the delivery of affordable housing elsewhere. And so this capital funding big request today in this report wants to tap into that Section 106 monies that's unallocated and in the funding pot. So the money being requested is to support a number of schemes. One of them is simply a switch of an allocation from one scheme that's not going forward to another scheme with Nottingham Community Housing Association. There's also a request to fund housing associations that are working on 3 different sites, and also a request to support the Community Land Trust and an almshouse on 2 sites. So there's a real range of schemes here. So the site in Ashbourne that is being proposed is 12 bungalows, and we're looking to provide funding both to support the money that they'll get from Homes England, but also to support green features, to explore the potential of really get an understanding of what would be really helpful and add to that scheme in terms of green features. And we've been doing some work around that. At Bakewell, we've got a scheme that's on site at Lady Manors, the score on their former land. We've got 30 affordable homes, and it's all affordable. The scheme at the minute needs an additional 80,000 to make that work. I've also been doing work with Bakewell Almshouse Trust. It's an almshouse that's obviously been around a long time, and it's got three houses for older people, and we've supported them in the past. And they're keen to, we've been working with them trying to find the site, and they're also now exploring, because it's so difficult in Bakewell, they're also exploring whether they can take on a property, buy a property. And what we'd like to do is put in some funding to really sort of support them in giving them the confidence to move forward on this, and look at potential new build, but also taking a property on, which obviously they'd need to move quite quickly, very quickly on. We've got an exciting proposal for a scheme that a member of our team, Bob White, has been working on with YMCA, looking at new supported accommodation in the form of potential foyer for young people. And that would be really exciting if we could, hopefully bring that forward with 60 new supported homes, but also looking at general needs housing on top with that as well, accommodation as well. And again, there's a request for $500,000 to really give the confidence to push that forward and make that work. In Wirksworth, we've been working with Community Land Trust, who are a very, very keen group, very keen on their energy efficient and the passive house, really trying to bring something forward. We've done site search work, working with planning here, and really trying to help them bring forward a site. And again, a proposal, we're asking for funding there to really sort of an exemplar scheme, really look at, we have a potential site working with Waterloo, looking at new build, hopefully new build units, and looking at sort of energy efficiency on that. But leaving our options open a bit, so there's that potential, but also the potential for the group, and the group are interested in possibly taking on a property and retrofitting it, increasing the energy efficiency of those homes. So giving them that sort of confidence to really move forward on this. We're also looking at, we still, although we've given, we have very little land left, we've used it to sort of for affordable housing previously. We have some pockets of land that we'd like to explore and look at developing for affordable homes. So there's a funding bid request there for 850,000. We've been sort of working out proposals and how that might work. So we have a bid in there to really give us the confidence to get your support and look at taking that forward. So the capital bit grant bid that this report that's bringing forward represents sort of 127 homes, potentially more, and together with the transfer of an existing allocation of 157 for 500. And also, since writing this report, we've had some really good news in that Peak District Rural Housing Association has been working with Bradwell Community Land Trust, and they've managed to secure the final bit in the jigsaw of funding from Sheffield City region of 270,000, which is absolutely fantastic, and that will allow them to buy 12 tenanted properties in Bradwell, which which are essentially they're open market, but they were very important to the community because they were are owned by Newburgh, and they were let at sort of affordable rents. So we've been, this is a really tremendous boost for the community and for Bakewell CLT and the work that it's been doing. So that's my presentation of the report. Thank you very much.
Councillor Hodgson.
Chair, Isabel, I'd like to thank you and your team for an excellent report. I'm happy to move the motion, and I was also very interested to hear all the additional information that you've given us. Enabling the development of affordable housing supports the District Council's priority of providing housing which meets local needs. 127 houses of varying types over a wide geographical area is to be applauded. I'm particularly interested, and I'm sure other councillors will be as well, with the additional green features that we're looking at, and also making more highly energy efficient houses and looking at passive houses. Thank you very much. I'll be moving motion.
Can I second that, Chair?
Yes, certainly, Councillor Ratcliffe. Councillor Berthel.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I'd like to echo the thanks to Isabel for an excellent report. It's good news that we've now got 127, obviously 112, I think, plus the 15 that are under different guise, if you like. I'd like to ask questions about the 12 bungalows at Ashbourne, for instance, with additional green features. Are they green in terms of climate change energy efficiency, or green in terms of landscaping? That's the first question. Obviously, it's bad news in terms of the Dove Garage at Mayfield Road site, but the fact that these funds are going to be transferred to the Persimmon site in Darley Dale. Is that the one behind the new medical centre? I presume it is. Yeah. So that's good news, I think, as well. But in terms of the Matlock site, that's interesting, because obviously I don't know where it is. Is it an existing development, and this part of that site which is going to be supported homes plus additional general needs accommodation with the YMCA, which again I can ask about that, I suppose, as to what exactly the involvement of the YMCA is. I didn't know they were involved in this sort of scheme, obviously in conjunction with the Nottingham Community Housing Association as agent. What exactly is that scheme, and how is that going to go forward, and how does it differ from other schemes within the Dales?
So in relation to the green features, and we've had some discussions with the housing associations, and we've provided some information about what they could provide for the 150,000. I think what obviously we're keen on is looking at things like the fabric first. We will explore you know, what they can do with that money. We've had some initial ideas, but we want to have further conversations with them. In relation to the YMCA, I think we'll come back with further information as that goes on, because at the moment there's still ongoing negotiations with the landowner, so it's difficult to say a deal about that at the moment. But we'll certainly come back and talk more about that.
It's a new development, then? A new site?
It's a proposal for a new site. Right. Yeah.
Councillor Purdy. Councillor Pawley. Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I've got 3 questions. Could you explain why the site at Lady Manners needs additional support? Because we have to sort of justify everything that we spend our money on at the moment, so I'd like to know what that reasoning for that is. The second one is the Matlock Scheme, which is, we've just said, is going to be a new site. Why is there no mention of any additional work that goes towards our climate change strategy in that? And the third one is this last one in Wirksworth, £350,000 to deliver homes, but also the £350,000 is to retrofit, form the right to buy homes or empty properties. Now, are you going to have more properties for your £350,000 if you're just doing that, or are you just going to have just the 2? And I can't quite see why you'd need to spend £350,000 on 2 for a retrofit and £350,000 on 2 new ones. So those are my questions.
I think if I start with the last one first, so with Worksworth, it's keeping some options open really. So obviously there's the potential to that you could deliver more units from that. So retrofitting would be about purchasing a property and doing
Might
that.
be more.
Pardon?
Might be more. Not
Yes. So potentially it could be more. But they're very keen on the high energy efficiency. So it's looking at sort of something we've not done before really, an exemplar scheme and learning from that. So the reasons for the additional support in Bakewell, and I've got a list here. So there were £130,000 of additional costs, commuted sums for sports aid, for rugby pitches of £50,000, and there were increased costs associated with final foundation design, piling to more plots, and planning requirements, increased hedge planting and dry stone walling. So there's an additional sort of 80,000. So Waterloo met 50,000 of that amount, and there's a shortfall still of 80,000. I also had some additional information today. So the total scheme cost now stands at 5.2 million, and that includes the land, which works out. So when we're talking about this issues about energy efficiency, we must remember that. So this is the Bakewell scheme currently, and this is 173,333. That's what it's costing per property. So.
And we are not mentioning anything on the Matlock one.
What was that? Sorry, on the Matlock.
Matlock one,
Yes.
We have no climate change.
And then on the
passive house is on the Matlock one.
It's certainly I think it's certainly something we can look at, and it's something we're certainly exploring. I think.
Well, in the light of our climate change declaration, I think it might be an idea to at least talk about it.
Yeah. The difficulty we have is that schemes are struggling to be viable without additional funding from the district council, just to meet the building regulations. So it's really being clear about where that additional money is going to come from. So for example, with Passive House, we've had information that Passive House is costing on one scheme 240,000 per house. That's one of the houses.
I'm not saying that I'm not going to support it. I just think that we need to know.
Councillor Purdy.
Thank you, Chair. I can assure Councillor Paulley that we have an agenda to try and get as much out of our developers as we can, but as I was right, an affordable home has its own difficulties in if it's affordable, and if we pump more green energy into it, it's higher cost, so it's pro quid pro really, so we're trying to get that balance. But I want to make 2 points for me. We had a very good meeting with Alison Clamp, Peak District Rural Housing Association yesterday, and this report just echoes what Alison said. We're held in the highest regard, not by just Peak District Rural, but I was at a meeting at Sheffield LEP Monday on their business development programme, which has got inclusivity into Derbyshire Dales and the Peak District. So I'm pleased that we're keeping a foot in that camp for the time being, and I intend to do so. And I was able to thank personally James Moore, the chairman, and Dr. David Smith, the chief executive, for granting this £270,000 toward Bradwell housing scheme, because Rob and I, we came out with a huge sigh of relief, because in the intervening period we've been talking about the Plan B. What if we didn't get those monies? Then we'd have to search around for those monies. So thank goodness they've given it to Bradwell, and hooray to the housing team for the work they do.
Councillor Gamble.
Okay. I mean, on the first developments, great. Thank you for the report, and good to see it's all going on. And also, to reiterate on the Bradwell thing, I know the people who run Bradwell CLT, I know they're extremely committed to providing houses, but that the local economy can afford, that they're not going to be looking at random things. They genuinely want their accommodation to be affordable, to they're very community-led. So, again, congratulations, and I'm glad that's got through. The last proposal, the 850,000, I mean, I really just wanted to say, I think this is something, speaking to Isabel this afternoon, that we really should be doing, this idea of building things for ourselves and building things that we're invested in. I was pleased to be told that we will be getting the rental income on these. And I just wondered, I think afterwards I suddenly thought, part of this, can we make commitments when we get this rental income that it is ploughed into housing? And is that the intention?
I think what we presented to the commercial board, so Rob has presented a report to the commercial board about the council potentially doing something themselves around council building, but obviously that hasn't been agreed as yet. So, but we need to sort of put something down, and this is the initial bid to look at what could be developed on the council land, whether that's us or whoever that develops that, depending on the council's later decision. It's obviously we've got that in our service plan as a developing idea, and we have council housing in our emerging corporate plan. So it's, but it's still quite early days, but we are working up those proposals to bring that back.
We'd obviously just really like to see that money going back into local housing.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I too welcome the report. It's great news. But I have a question on paragraph 2.3 and the recommendation there. Now, as I understand it, the 15 homes, 15 affordable homes on the Persimmon site in Darley Dale, they're being built and financed by Persimmon themselves. And the agreement, therefore, there's no cost to the district council in the construction of those 15 homes, and yet we're now being asked to find £157,000 to enable a housing association to buy them. I struggle a little bit to see the logic of this. As I understand it, the Section 106 agreement was that Persimmon built the 15 affordable homes, then transferred them at an agreed price to a registered social landlord. If they can't agree the price, then Persimmon don't build any of the houses at all, not just the affordable. They don't develop the site out. So I would have thought that it's in Persimmon's interest to agree a price with Nottingham or an RSL in order them to be able to develop out their site. So I said I struggle for the logic as to why we're being asked to put £157,000 to enable existing affordable houses to be acquired by a registered social landlord.
We have had a huge number of private developers and Section 106 affordable housing units coming forward over the past few years. I brought a report to committee back in June. I can't remember the numbers, but I think it's sort of over 300 affordable homes coming through the system from Section 106 sites, I think it was. So we have had issues about housing associations, not just in the number of sites coming forward and the number of affordable homes coming forward on Section 106 sites, both in Derbyshire Dales and some of the adjoining local authorities, which means that housing associations have been at their limit really of what they can take on in terms of Section 106 units, and they also have a grant programme which is completely separate to the Section 106 units that they still have to purchase. So part of our strategy for trying to ensure, helping to ensure and give confidence to housing associations, ensure that investment was coming into our area rather than other areas, was to support housing associations to take on some of those units on certain sites, which has been previously brought to committee.
If I come back on that, you're not really explaining to me why we are having to fund £157,000 additional monies when Persimmon is building affordable homes as part of the Section 106 agreement. And if Nottingham find that difficult to afford, surely there are other registered social landlords who may wish to take on the units at a price agreed with Persimmon without the need for district council funding. Obviously the 157,000, that's equivalent to land for another 10 affordable homes, and that may be a better use for it.
I think the point that Isabel's trying to make is that housing associations can invest their resources in any authority across their operating area. So an organisation like NCHA may, for example, have capacity to buy 300 or 400 affordable homes a year from Section 106 homes, and they can choose to do that wherever they like. We've got a really good relationship with Peterborough, Notts Common and Waterloo, but they're still under pressure to deliver their programme. Reports we've brought to the committee before, in one way we're fortunate, we've got a huge supply of affordable housing coming to us on about 25 sites, all with outline consent. That's over 400 units at its peak. And we need to encourage and give confidence to associations to invest in our authorities, because they could easily go and work elsewhere, and they do. They work across Lincolnshire, Nottinghamshire, Rutland, etc. So if we can support their investment here by using some of our investment, they're more inclined to work here than they are to go to Amber Valley, High Peak and beyond. So it's an arrangement we have with the associations to get them to invest here, because we've had situations in the past where it's a good example in Ashbourne, where a developer had been out to tender twice and had no interest in any housing associations at all, and we were at risk of losing 43 affordable homes on one site, and that would have stopped the whole development. Now that isn't the sort of headline we want to make in terms of delivering not just affordable housing but market housing. And it was only through the negotiations with Waterloo where they agreed to spend £2 million on those 45 homes. So that close relationship we need with our association partners to make sure we can deliver both of our affordable housing commitments and our market development commitments as well.
Councillor Ball.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, a question and then a little comment if possible. Could I just ask where the 12 bungalows in Ashbourne are going to be, or are they on variable sites?
I don't think I can say quite at the moment. No, it's not quite
Right.
It's not quite been agreed yet.
Okay,
No.
that's fine. Okay, but on that, just a little comment, please. I would just like to say, well, I'm really pleased that these do come, and a past councillor, as everybody will know, Tony Millwood, he always asked for bungalows. So hopefully he's looking down and saying, at last. So thank you very much for that.
Councillor Hobson. Chair, I was going to reiterate just what Councillor Purdy had said, because we'd had this meeting yesterday with Alison Clamp from Peak District Rural Housing Association. But going on from that,
Rob's explained the complex relationship we do have with our housing association partners, and we want these people to work with us in our area and invest in our area. So thank you, Isabel and Rob, for just explaining that a little bit more.
Councillor Ratcliffe.
Yes, thank you, Chair. A question and a comment too, with perhaps a little explanation about this passive house in Wirksworth, which is hopefully going to be developed through the CLT that I mentioned before when I declared an interest. But the question relates to paragraph 1.6 and 3.1. I'm assuming that the 3 million that we have as unallocated funding is primarily 106 monies that have received. Now, of course, in the risk assessment, it said about the fact that those monies have to be spent within a certain time frame, otherwise they have to be returned. I just wondered, first of all, how precarious, as it were, that 3 million is, but then just relating to that amount, 3 million, it seems quite a huge amount. Are there plans to devolve it out into housing? This is primarily a funding, a very broad funding application, but we have seemingly a large amount already in our coffers. So, I mean, it's just a bit of clarification on that.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So, Mike Hayes is also here. He might have a view as well on Section 106 contributions, but we have, I think it's about 5 years in order to get the money in and get the money out again. So the council has a very good system in place through its business support team to ensure we collect the funding as the triggers are met within planning approvals and developments start. And of course then in the background the housing team with our association partners are identifying and commissioning developments either directly through a housing association or as in the discussion just now on other Section 106 sites where the money can be spent. So we're very mindful of the timetable that we have, and of course we work very closely with our colleagues in the finance team to make sure we spend, if you like, the oldest money first. So we're never at risk of having to repay old cash, if you like. So we manage that process very carefully to ensure that we wouldn't ever be in a position that we have to give money back.
Okay, Wirksworth situation. I think it's accepted now, or well, hopefully it is, that this council is going to have to change its approach in its relationship with housing developers so that we are much more proactive in seeking the highest possible design that mitigates against carbon emissions and therefore addresses our climate change aspirations. The highest possible form of housing development is that of passive house, but passive house is a more demanding technical exercise requiring regular inspections through the building process, which ultimately demands a higher cost. So that's the reason why in the Wirksworth case you're only getting 2 properties, one of which of course is going to be retrofit anyway, but the development of the passive house might well be of the order of 250,000 of that. But the outcome of that will be a house that this council can be proud to show off, and I believe in the same way, even I know I'm exaggerating slightly, but in the way that Norwich City Council has shown other councils what it can achieve. If we can rightly point to the development of a property which is of the very highest standards, that will be a model for us, and it would give us a high profile. But not only that, it will have given us the experience of building to this standard, which is exactly what we all would like to come about in future housing developments. We may not get there, but my word, you know, we'll have something that we can point to and say, this is really our target, this is where we'd like to be. So I think, myself, it's money well spent. It may not be producing the numbers, but it will give us the outcome that I think everybody in this council should be aspiring to.
Thank you. Are there any more questions? No? Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favour?
Unanimous.
Thank you. Would you like to
Oh, yeah.
Is it already next door?
Yeah, thank you, Helen, for covering for item 7. So we now move on to item 8, which is the Darley Dale Neighbourhood Plan. Mike, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'll be brief on this one because I think the report in itself is pretty self-explanatory. We are at the stage now in our 3rd neighbourhood plan to reach this particular part of the process. As you'll see from the report, the independent examiner is now recommending that, subject to the modifications that are set out in his report, that the Darley Dale Neighbourhood Plan can proceed to a referendum, and that we're working with our colleagues in the electoral registration team to work on a date of the 21st of January 2020 for that to be held. Happy to answer any questions on it.
Councillor Sabre.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, I'd like to move the recommendations. Darley Dale Town Council and the steering group have worked long and hard on this, and it needs to move forward, so I'm happy to move the recommendations.
Councillor Froggatt.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm happy to second it.
Okay. Councillor Ratcliffe.
Thank you, Chair. I don't think there's a great deal to be said because you know, clearly, as has been said, a great deal of work has gone into this. I think they've probably been going, to my knowledge, maybe 4 years, Andrew, I'm not sure, but certainly of that sort of period. And that's how long, generally, it takes to get one of these up to this stage. You know, it's no mean feat. And there is a cost to be borne. Now, on that cost, may I ask a slightly rhetorical question? My experience of Wirksworth, which, as you know, was the first one to enter through this process, when we held the referendum, it was most advantageous, you know where I'm coming from, don't you? Yeah. To hold that referendum at the same time when the 2015 election, general election, was held. How about having on the 12th of December? I think it would produce a cost saving and may encourage people to turn out too.
Chair, I did have that same sort of thought yesterday when the discussion was being had in Parliament, and I did have the discussion with Sandra about the practicalities of running the two in parallel and on the same day. The advice from her was that because of the way in which the notification procedures work and the timescales for each are different, it's not going to be practical to be able to run them on the same day.
Any other questions? No? I mean, I'd just like to add in sort of support of what Councillor Ratcliffe said, the benefits of having a neighbourhood plan. We've had one in Bradwell, and it does take a lot of effort to get them through. And you do tend to flag it at various stages of it, but it is certainly worth persevering with. And I would like to see more communities sort of taking that on. And we, like Wordsworth, also developed on from that a community land trust, which has been incredibly beneficial for the village, as you probably heard in the last item. So that has been moved and seconded. All in favour?
Unanimous.
Unanimous, thank you. Next item is the Homeless Reduction Act. Simon, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. For those who don't know me, my name is Simon Bainin. I manage the Homelessness and Housing Advice team in the housing team, Derbyshire Dales. In April 2018, the Homelessness Reduction Act came into force, which significantly reformed England's homelessness legislation by placing new duties on local authorities. The report sets out a brief background to those changes, the team roles to provide the service, funding received to implement the changes, the first year statistics, and some minor changes to our homelessness prevention strategy. I think the best way of demonstrating the changes is in Appendix 1 and 2. I've given you two diagrams. Diagram 1 is the very simple step-by-step change in relation to homelessness. And each of those steps filtered out somebody in relation to those that we would need to help. Whereas Appendix 2 shows you the new diagram that we have to use for every person who walks through our door. And now everybody who approaches us who are threatened with homelessness has to receive a service. And that service is up to 56 days that we have to work with them for, plus do a lot more work with them in relation to the legislation. The revised homelessness and rough sleeper strategy is attached to this report and is available on the members' portal. We've developed a comprehensive network of support both internally and with external partners. The Informers notified the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government when they visited in September, which puts Derbyshire Dales District Council in the top quarter in delivering positive outcomes, is testament to the dedicated work the team and partners provide in the Derbyshire Dales. I'm happy to take any questions on the report.
Councillor Morley.
Not a question, Chair. I would just like to move the report when it's appropriate. It's a good report, and I was particularly going to congratulate you on the flow charts at the end, which make things a lot clearer. So when it's appropriate, I'd like to move it, Chair.
Councillor Radcliffe.
Thank you, Chair. I'll put this mic on. Right, I'll second it, and I have a question and a comment. I'll start with my comment because it underlies the reason why I so readily wish to support what the recommendations are, indeed the report itself. Paragraph 3.41, I think, sets it out. This council has a homeless and benefits team which is second to none. And that prompts my question in a way, because I read that the increases in approaches to the district have risen by 213%. No mean figure. The increase in approaches for help as a result of landlord issues is 800%. Whilst, as I just said, I think we have an excellent welfare team under Simon, I just would like some reassurance that he has the adequate resources, and this is not escalating as a result, his workload is not escalating because of, universal credit and all those other nasties around. Are you managing okay?
Thank you, Chair. We brought a report to community, to the leadership team in relation to the funding that we were given from government in preparation for this, and we did change the team to prepare for what we considered is the numbers that we were going to walk through our door, and I think we did get that correct
We do have sufficient resources, although we look a very small team in terms of Derbyshire Dale staff, because only 2.7 dealing with homelessness and the housing advice element. We've got a much wider team around us, for example at Durham Housing, who provide support to local people who are struggling with their tenancies, CAB who provide money and debt advice, and we've got a new service in the area which is Call Before You Serve, which is specifically aimed at landlords and tenants who are at fear or threat of losing their home. And this is a prime example as why we've embraced this service in the Derbyshire Dales, because of the increased number of those losing their private tenancies.
Two more very quick questions that are just leapt to mind, Chair, if you don't mind, just to ask Simon while I've got this opportunity. First of all, you talk about the provision of shelter for homeless and our legal responsibility and obligation. What's our capacity? How many properties or what? How much accommodation have we available? Given the fact, of course, that our responsibility extends not just to Derbyshire Dales residents who might be on the streets, but people crossing over, say, from Chesterfield.
Yeah, certainly capacity. In terms of the Homeless Reduction Act and the chart that I've given you, the legislation is now blind to local connection, but that's only for the prevention side. So if somebody in Chesterfield wants to make a homelessness approach to us, then we would only deal with them on the prevention side. At the point that they do lose their accommodation, we wouldn't have the duty to provide them with temporary accommodation. So that part of the legislation remains the same. We only have a duty to provide people in temporary accommodation who are local to our area. Capacity, we do have units of accommodation. We work with Notts Community Housing Association who provide our temporary accommodation on our behalf. We have direct referrals into that accommodation, and they have 12 units of accommodation. 12. But our capacity, it doesn't matter how many we've got. If we had 40 people walk through the door tomorrow who needed accommodation, then we would have to provide that accommodation. We would look to maybe, again, go and talk to housing associations about availability that they can provide us, and as a last resort, we would provide bed and breakfast.
And just finally, I along with Lewis Rose at the time, was in part instrumental in setting up that hardship fund, which we increased, if you remember. I think the amount stands at something like 17,000 at the moment. Anyway, my question related to that is, could you perhaps at some point, not this evening, just let us know whether you feel that is still adequate for the purpose that it was agreed for?
Certainly, yeah, that would be to do with discretionary housing payments for council tax. Yeah. So that would be Karen Henrikson's department, but I should certainly pass that on. Yeah.
Councillor Pawley.
Yes, I've just got one question, Chair. I was interested to see that you don't just have to do an assessment, you have to do a personalised plan of steps to take forward to relieve homelessness or prevent it. The question I wanted to ask you was, does that chart that you've got, a second chart you've got there, allow you to, in your assessment, look at people who've got health problems that might, if you place them in a house or a flat, within a couple of months, mean that they're out on their ear again because they've misbehaved because of problems that they have? Because we've had that in Massam Ward, and it seems to me that I wonder if you've got any contacts with social services so that you don't actually try and place them somewhere you think this one ought to have better treatment.
Certainly, it's a difficult question to answer really, because each case that comes to our door is very different from the case before, and where there's a duty for us to place somebody either in temporary accommodation or to provide them with ongoing permanent accommodation, we do our best to place them within the resources that we have. And if it's somebody who's approaching us with a medical issue, then yes, we do get that advice either from their GP or medical professionals, because we have to look at that as part of the whole package of assessment to understand what their circumstances, why they've become homeless, what their support needs are, and what their needs and wants are. So again, if they want to live in a particular area, then that's part of the personalised housing plan that's something that we will look at or look to assist them with. But similarly, as it's needs and wants, although they may want something, when we haven't got that, then we have to work with them to look at other things that may be suitable for them, and there may have to be compromises, certainly by the applicant who's sat in front of us, who may want a particular area that we just can't provide accommodation or the right accommodation for.
I suppose my question really was that if you think that they shouldn't be put in accommodation, but they should be treated in another way, does that get taken forward? Because I think it's very distressing, not only for the person themselves to find themselves not coping when they've been put in a flat, say, but for the people around them, particularly if it's an elderly person. I'm just wondering if there is any facility within that planning to say, no, this person shouldn't be on their own in a flat, but should be taken into a more caring accommodation.
Certainly, if we identify that somebody shouldn't be a tenant, then we would be making that point and looking at alternatives for them. The issue of capacity, again, is a very difficult one to argue, because it's only the individual that can make that judgment as to capacity, unless there's a mental health support person behind that saying that this person cannot maintain a tenancy. But in all cases where somebody shows us that they're going to struggle, we will provide them with the best supported assistance that we can, and that's why we've got a Dulham working directly with our team, and we can transfer them to them, certainly in the first instance to help them move in and to maintain that tenancy as best they can, and flag up if there are any ongoing issues, so that other resources or other services can be brought in to support that person. Because at the end of the day, we want them to remain there as long as they can, unsupported, without causing issues to either themselves or others.
Well, I think to be congratulated, that just flags up what a wonderful scheme you're all running. Yeah, thanks very much.
I'm going back to Councillor Ratcliffe's question. I'm bringing Paul in to give a response.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm just going to pick up on that point. Members may recall that Paul Radcliffe, from our partner of Arto, has attended council meetings before on this very issue and has given an update. And the situation regarding the discretionary housing payments budget is kept under regular review, such that if Paul ever feels that there are insufficient resources to meet the needs of our residents, there is an expectation that will come back before members for reconsideration. Yeah. But at the moment, Paul's advice is that the budget we have set aside is adequate.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Councillor Burfoot.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of, first of all, I'd like to congratulate Simon and his team for this excellent report. In terms of homeless approaches and the 85% prevention rate, which is flagged up in the report, I wonder if Simon is confident, or how many, or what proportion of homelessness cases or victims, if you can call them that, do actually approach the team for help? And does he think that there are a significant number of on-street or hidden homeless people, perhaps sofa surfers, regular sofa surfers, or even rough sleepers in the street? I don't know that I've seen many in this area particularly, but there are one or two that do, if you like, hang about Matlock town centre on a regular basis. So I wonder if they are actually rough sleepers, and are there many in Derbyshire Dales? It's not obviously a significant problem compared to cities, but can you answer that question?
Certainly, in terms of rough sleepers, we're aware of one gentleman who frequents Matlock. There's a national service which is called StreetLink, which anybody who sees somebody sleeping rough can report on an online form that somebody is sleeping rough, and that then comes to the local authority, and we would chase or follow those up. Obviously, we are only a 9 to 5 service, or 8 till 6 service, so to actually go along at midnight when somebody's bedding down is quite difficult for us as a team. But we do follow up all of those reports. The gentleman that I've spoken about that we're aware of is been in and around Matlock for some considerable months. We speak to him on a regular basis and refuses any assistance that we offer to him, but we'll continue to have that conversation with him. As a slight aside, Derbyshire authorities have just been awarded £250,000 to provide a rough sleep service across the county. So that'll be coordinated by local authorities, and then a separate tender process for an organisation to provide outreach and support into accommodation. So that should commence within the next 4 to 6 weeks. So again, that's another string to our bow. And those services, we certainly can point people out at midnight to say this person's seen at this particular time, this location, and they will turn up and have those conversations, and maybe in a better position to offer more support than we can in offering facilities.
Councillor Purdy.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to back up what Simon says, not to say we don't disbelieve you, we do. But I've spoken to the gentleman concerned as well, because he's been in Matlock Bath a number of times. And yes, he just refuses help. Looks a poor, pitiful soul, but in his own way seems quite happy. So, you know, he knows the offer is there.
Councillor Morley, do you want to come back, or can we take it that you have moved the recommendation?
I think it's been very well discussed, and again, I'm just reiterating that I think it's a good report and easy to read. Thanks, Chair.
Any other questions, or to gamble?
Just 2 questions, both of them totally quite simple one. The first one, just on that table 1. We've got all the funding, there's the gross funding. It'd be interesting to have that back to 10. Oh, sorry.
Sorry. The table at table 1, sorry. We've got the gross funding figures, just as a comparison, just to see how well we're doing compared to other authorities in terms of funding. A per head figure might be quite useful to know what sort of, you know, is our figure low because we've got low homelessness rates, or are we low funded? And the second one is just do we have any homeless hostels?
Take the first question first. I actually took the per head figure off this chart when I put it into this.
Oh, right, sorry.
It's a little bit too long. But yeah, I mean, I can certainly put that on the portal and show that.
It'd be interesting.
And unfortunately, it still does show us as being offered the smallest amount of money in that particular funding round for the transformation chain, or for that particular change money that we received. Hostels, we don't have any hostels. In fact, there are no homeless hostels in the whole of Derbyshire in terms of direct access hostels. We have other forms of accommodation. I say bed and breakfast is the last resort in terms of if we required to place somebody immediately. So if again we have an out-of-hours service, so if somebody phoned up now, then they'd be placed into a bed and breakfast and told to come to us.
I'm just thinking, you sort of, this particularly street gentlemen, quite a lot of people like that would probably be quite reluctant to go into bed and breakfast, but sometimes in emergency or in times of need, they will approach hostels.
Yeah, well, like I say, unfortunately, there are no hostels in Derbyshire at all. We have something called severe weather provision, which again the government asked that we, under severe weather, basically at any time between the 1st of December and the end of April, beginning of March, that we look to take anybody who's off the streets, because obviously it's just not the right place to be in that time of year. What we work with is we work with Chesterfield Borough, who provide a night shelter service with a church organisation, and Derby City will also provide that type of service as well. So that will continue again this winter, and again we make all that information available to the support services that work with people in the local authority area.
Okay, great, thank you.
We have no other speakers, so it has been moved and seconded. All in favour?
Unanimous.
Unanimous. Thank you. Move on now to item 10, Food Law Enforcement Service Business Plan 2019 and 20. Tim, please.
Thank you, Chair. This is an annual report that we bring before committee, and which in the last couple of years I've been quite brief in explaining. I think existing members will know that the Council offers a food safety inspection service through our environmental health team, but it might not be obvious to all new members that that's something we do. So if, with your indulgence, I'll explain a little bit more about it than I might otherwise have done. So the report's intended to inform members of the work undertaken by what we call the commercial team, which is a sub-team within our environmental health section. And they're the team who are responsible for going out there and making sure that all our food manufacturers, our caterers, our food shops, our outlets are safe. They're coming up to standard and they're offering food which isn't going to make people ill. just as a bit of information, the environmental health commercial team is probably the team within the council that is making most use of agile working. There are some of them that I just don't see anymore from month to month. They work from home, they get out there, they inspect the food premises, they go and they write up their reports and send them back through the IT system, and it works very well. Other than some of them I quite like, and I don't see them as often as I would like to. You'll see from the report, well, from the appendix to the report, that the team is quite small. We've got 4 field operatives, not all of them full-time, and they go out there and they are responsible for inspecting around 1,400 food premises in total. They don't all get inspected every year. We tend to inspect between 400 and 500 food premises every year. We do bolster that team. There's obviously some management support to that team, but we bolster them as well with a food hygiene consultant who we use to carry out inspections of our medium and lower risk food premises to just make sure we hit the numbers that we need to do. And in that way we're able to save our officer resource for the higher risk and more complex work, which hopefully is more interesting for them, and it does mean as well that we're able to control some of the unpredictable things that come in. So when Why Not Festival comes in, for example, and we need to go and inspect the stages and make sure they're safe, we've got officers who can do that. We don't rely on consultancy support for that. You'll see that the team undertakes many other duties. I mentioned Why Not Festival, undertakes many other duties in relation to their work, not just food hygiene inspections. So they are responsible for health and safety enforcement out there in the private sector. They're responsible for investigating outbreaks of infectious disease such as food poisoning, and they carry out some of the licensing inspections for us as well. Capacity within the team is an area of continuing concern, and is something that we've been asked to investigate, and we're looking at whether there's a way of creating an affordable resource within an affordable extra resource within the team, and that might very well come before council in the not too distant future. As I said, I mentioned the team deals with 1,400 food premises, and they carry out what they call interventions. We're not meant to call them just inspections anymore, so an intervention can have many forms, the main one of which is still inspection, and we undertake around 400 to 500 a year. One of the ways that we do that is something called an alternative enforcement strategy. So for the very low risk food premises, what we would call a category E premises, something that really, like a sweet shop or a greengrocer, that really doesn't present any real risk of food poisoning. We might not inspect them on a regular basis, but we will have other ways of getting in touch with them to make sure that that's still the business that they are undertaking, that the proprietor remains the same, that they have some knowledge of their responsibilities. So we might do phone surveys or postal surveys for some of the very low risk businesses as well. That's been very helpful in making sure that some members might recall that we had the Food Standards Agency visit us back in 2015, who were concerned about the large raft of low-risk food premises that hadn't been visited for a while. The alternative enforcement strategy met with their approval, and they're very happy with the situation that we're in now. We tend to concentrate our resources, particularly our own in-house officer resources, at the higher risk food premises, those that are either inherently risky, such as a butcher's premises producing both raw and cooked foods, or a large food manufacturer. We do have some of those in the area, rather than concentrating those resources at the sweet shops and greengrocers of the world. And in particular, our focus is on trying to concentrate on those food premises that are described as not broadly compliant with food hygiene standards, which means they don't comply with all aspects of the law. And our work, as we see it, is not necessary to go out there and prosecute them, but is to hopefully bring them up to standards. So we put considerable time into trying to advise them as to how they might go about doing that. The information from all those interventions is collected back here at the office and is fed in every week into the Food Hygiene Rating Scheme, which is the online system that you might be aware of that rates food premises from 0 to 5. Our main objective within the environmental health food team is to bring as many businesses as we can up to the standard of 5, the best standard within the scheme. That's good for us. It makes our life easier. It's good for them. It should be a good advertising ploy for them, and it helps to sell the district if we can say that we've got a huge proportion of premises that are genuinely category 5 food premises. This particular year there's been a focus on allergens in food. You'll be aware probably of items in the news about a poor girl dying of an allergy related issue down in London. That's a joint responsibility that we share with Trading Standards up at the County Council, but in reality most of the field work is done within not just Derbyshire Dales but all the districts and boroughs in Derbyshire. They're the ones getting out there doing the inspections. So we put considerable resource into providing advice on allergens this year, which I think has been very well welcomed in most food premises. The good news last year is that we did manage to inspect 99% of our higher risk businesses. It's a holiday area, sometimes you get out there and the food premises just aren't open, so getting 100% is quite difficult. We also, which I'm quite pleased about, managed to inspect 98% of our lower risk businesses. That was the area that we were not so hot on in previous years. So the work we've done on the alternative enforcement has really reaped dividends there. Just so as you know, we do carry out some enforcement activity. Last year we accepted 2 voluntary closures of food businesses. That's a situation where officers go out and find somewhere that's presenting a risk to the consumer. And we have a number of ways we can deal with that, the easiest of which is to encourage them to close voluntarily for a set period of time. That's normally used where they're just dirty and we want to get them cleaned up to an acceptable standard, or we want them to deal with the pest issue within the premises. Thankfully this year the 2 voluntary closures that we accepted were remedied with the cooperation of the business owner and were not deemed necessary to take to prosecution, which I don't think is a sign of weakness. I think that's a sign of improvement. We did, however, serve three what's called hygiene improvement notices, where we found businesses and required them to carry out works as a precursor to enforcement action. In all 3 cases, those works were undertaken and we didn't have to proceed to prosecution. So that's quite pleasing as well. And that's a brief run through of the work that the food team do, just so as you're aware of their existence and what they do. I'll happily accept any questions, which hopefully I'll be able to answer, although I am a bit far removed from them now.
Thanks, Tim. Councillor Purdy.
Thank you, Chair. Well, this is really a hidden part of this authority's work and very much under sort of, not valued, it's very highly valued, but it doesn't seem that we give it due regard as we should do. It's pleasing to hear the 91% record, Tim, that's excellent. So I think our thanks from this authority should go to the team, whoever they are, wherever they are. Probably ought to be a part of that team if there's food tasting involved. But I just wonder, I'm pleased to see about the D2N2 Sheffield links in the business point there. But my question is, and I'm happy to move the recommendations, but what's referred to in the Brexit issue? What's the preparations with regard to this issue and Brexit? Is it the supply coming in or is it purely on standards?
Okay, well, from that, there are different problems in different areas of the country, as there are with many EU exit-related issues. Our main issue is about exports. At the moment, food can be exported to the European Union without the need for a health certificate. No barriers to trade and all that kind of thing. We do offer a service where we provide health certificates, and that's basically a certification that the premises have been inspected and come up to standard. Mostly those certificates are given to businesses exporting to the United Arab Emirates. We do also give food certificates to Doveridge Brewery. They tend not to export to the United Arab Emirates for obvious reasons. But there's expected to be a big increase in the numbers of businesses requiring certification, depending on what happens in relation to a deal in the EU exit. If there's no deal, it's expected that all businesses exporting will require health certification, which will be good for us in terms of raising money because we charge for that service, but will require additional officer time.
And just come back, Chair, because obviously that raises some points on the Brexit issue. I mean, we know we've got a Brexit plan, we know we've got our officers, chief execs and senior officers working on that and have been for some time. So we're talking about capacity, so there seems to be a capacity problem there. Whatever happens from Brexit, we'll have to wait and see. I also wonder, with regard to, you mentioned on the worry about capacity, and whilst we have a customer survey, is there any way we can engage with the food eating public in any way more to help the officers in this issue?
That's an interesting question. Some years ago we used to, like we've got Dales Matters, we used to run a bit of a newsletter called Food Matters for the Derbyshire Dales, and that's something that we, excuse me, that's something that we did cease, when funding became scarcer, if I can put it in those terms. We have been given authority by the Chief Executive to look at resources within the team, and information on that will be coming back. Obviously we've got to make sure that's affordable. The Council's already done that in relation to some areas of the operations of the Council, and we're looking at it in environmental health currently. As far as the Brexit issue goes, we've already inspected the food premises, so we know what they're like. The capacity issue is purely going to be getting out certificates. At the moment, we send out maybe one a week, something like that. They're around £43, by the way. And it's likely that that would increase considerably. So the resource required might not be environmental health, it might be more business support, if I'm honest. But it is in our Brexit preparation plans.
I'm sorry to come back, Chair, but again, it raises another point. On the Ben, wasn't it? I forget his name, Paul, forgive me, the transformation officer who just set on. Glenn, thank you. Is he including that in his work? Because that seems vital.
Glenn's immediate work is in other areas of the council, but he has engaged. I've spoken to Glenn, and he's aware of some of the wishes and requirements that we've got going forward. It's purely production of certificates here and making sure we get those out, increasing inquiries. I think we can handle it. If there's more specialist knowledge required, there is a county pool of officers with specialists, particularly in the manufacturing industry. We've actually got, and Steve Cates has told you this before about our manufacturing sector, we've actually got quite a lot of food manufacturing in the area, and we deal with them on a regular basis. And we have good relations, I think, with all of them. So I think from a technical point of view, we can cope with it. We'd have to see what the demand would be. Hopefully, that scenario of a requirement for certification for every export will not come to pass.
Councillor Burfoot.
If it's not being seconded, I'll second the recommendations. And congratulate Tim on the excellent report and the business plan in this report. But I'd just like to ask how Tim thinks or how confident does Tim think the public should be in terms of residents and visitors in buying food from food shops or from visiting cafes and restaurants and so on. And in terms of the public evidence of the cafe or restaurant's quality, these window stickers that are displayed, are they compulsory? And so the rating says 1 to 5. I mean, obviously the reluctance on the part of a business to display it if it was only 1 or 2. But I mean, I've not noticed them personally. I suppose I know the restaurants that I visit, and I don't tend to look in the window before I go in to see what the score is. But it's interesting if you go somewhere you're not familiar with.
There's two sides to that, Chair. Firstly, the direct question, no, there's no legal requirement to display the stickers in the window in England. There is in Wales. And we've lobbied for some time for it. Chartered Institute of Environmental Health has lobbied for some time to make that compulsory in England. All the ratings are published on the web and can be checked there. It's actually a pretty robust measurement of food hygiene standards within a business, not necessarily food quality, but food hygiene standards within a business, and it looks at the food hygiene practices within there, whether they're structurally compliant as well, and the level of control they have over their food preparation, making sure they have a good understanding of food hazards and they are controlling them. So it is a pretty robust system. So I think, Councillor Phillips, you said thanks for the quality of the report. I should thank Amanda Goodwin, who actually produces the proper report here. Amanda's on leave at the moment, I can't be here. She puts a lot of work into making sure that our team is aimed at bringing premises up to standard, bringing them up to the highest possible standard, and that's ultimately what we're aiming for. I can't claim that all businesses within the area are completely compliant, but I am pleased, and I've reported year on year, the level of broad compliance. So the number of businesses that are generally in compliance with the law has increased year on year, and that's a good measure of success, I think.
Councillor Ratcliffe.
Thank you, Chair. Being principally responsible for my own domestic waste management, the thought occurs to me, 1,400 premises, the waste disposal, food waste disposal from those, is it managed in a different way to domestic users? And again, do you monitor that to see that it's being done correctly?
I can answer some of that in the sense of the enforcement work that officers carry out on site. What I can't answer is what's in our waste contract, and Ash may be able to. officers do check that proper arrangements are in place for waste disposal when they inspect food premises. So there must be an arrangement with a registered waste carrier. It must be going down a proper disposal route. We have had campaigns in the past to encourage particularly takeaway food premises to recycle the royals, things like that. But as time has gone by, there's more time spent on the compulsory core work of environmental health and less on the value-added stuff. Because
just a little aside, I was reflecting in conversation with someone the other day of the time when food users could have an arrangement with a local pig farmer.
I do know some pig farmers for other reasons because they produce their own problems, but we have come into an arrangement with that. I don't know, Ash, if there's anything to say in relation to our waste contract.
Just briefly, if I may, Chair. Just following on what Tim has said, Councillor Ratcliffe, we don't. Trade waste does not have to be taken up through the District Council. Premises should have a trade waste arrangement in place. We do offer that service. Under the current contract, we've not grown that service because the contractor hasn't had capacity to do that. But the new contract, we've been clear that we do want to grow the trade waste, certainly in terms of recycling, which is not a service that is offered under the current contract. So it is a main feature of the new contract.
We have no more speakers. It's been moved but not seconded. Do we have a second? Yeah, thank you. Thank you. All in favour?
I think Councillor Sutton has to abstain, doesn't he, as he left the room during the discussion. So.
Oh, yeah, okay. Good.
Okay.
Thank you. Next item is item 11, the proposed community asset transfer. Sorry, do you want to say something? When I've said this. Oh, okay. Proposed community asset transfer, Doveridge Burial Ground. Councillor Morley.
I'm sorry to hog it, Chair. I do apologise for being too eager. I had to think about this before I could move it, whether I had a personal interest, because I live in Doveridge and I've not been so good lately.
Can you say, would you like to hear, Councillor Morley, would you like to hear the officers' report first?
Yeah, I'd like to hear the officers, yeah. I'd like to move it anyway, because I'm on the PCC.
That's great. Mike, who's sitting over there.
Okay, thank you, Chair. It's a fairly self-explanatory report, this one, but it's really looking at dealing with a piece of land that we acquired some 14 years ago to develop as a burial ground for Doveridge. And for various reasons that are outlined in the report, it wasn't required at the time. And it's been basically mothballed ever since, but it's been sitting there as consecrated land with the various enabling works, development works having been carried out, ready to use when the time is right. That time has now come, and Doveridge Parish Council are running out of capacity at the existing burial ground in Doveridge, so require use of this site. But in the intervening time, a number of matters have changed. Particularly, the authority had a burials review, a total review of the burial service in 2017, which, as I've outlined in the report, concluded that the future provision within the district should be focused at the 6 main sites, which are outlined in paragraph 2.3. So, since the time of that review, we wouldn't now acquire land like this and develop it for burial ground use. The reason being that this was a historic site that we developed before the review came in. What would normally happen now with something like this is that the local parish council would administer the site in terms of capacity, arranging burials, arranging to maintain the site, and generally dealing with all the administration and the costs. The other change that we've brought in, or we're looking at the moment, which is outlined in the Council's asset management plan, is to look at the rationale for owning land. Where we do own land, is it contributing and supporting our corporate aims and objectives, or is it supporting a main service area, or is there another way of delivering the service, and is the land needed to be owned by the District Council? Now in this case, the Parish Council have actually asked us, as well as taking over the administration of the site, they would be interested in actually taking on the land, taking on ownership as a community asset transfer. So that's really what we are proposing. We're not forcing it on them, they've actually asked that question, but I think it does make sense. It is in accordance with the Burials Review, it is in accordance with the asset management plan, and it enables them to have a plan going forward for Doveridge, but it also enables them to manage the site and also to derive a small income from part of the site that could be let for grazing use in the meantime. So that really concludes the report, but I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Councillor Morley.
Forgive me, Chair, just to... I'm just reassuring colleagues, really, that I'm on the Parochial Church Council at Doveridge, and the bottom third of the churchyard was underwater at the weekend when the dove burst its bank, so there is a need for this burial ground, and it will be well looked after because we've got a retired policeman, John Boynton, who looks after all the parish council stuff, so I'm confident that it will be well maintained, well looked after. So sorry for jumping in, but I'd like to move the report and recommendation, Chair.
Any questions, or would somebody like to second? Thank you. All in favour?
Unanimous.
Thank you. Item 12, update on the review of Ashbourne stall markets. Ash, please.
Thank you, Chair. In the main, this report is an update report following the previous one in February this year. And the first point is to note that the transfer of the Thursday market has now taken place. In fact, that happened on the 24th of October, and again in line with the recommendations set out in February report 2019 is that the Thursday market in Ashbourne is to close. As stated in the February report, if occupancy levels remain below 70%, the market would close permanently. As you will note from the report, current occupancy levels since April have averaged at 13%, and more recently from August until this last week they were at 10%. I understand that it's not a position we want to find ourselves in terms of closing a market, but I would like to assure members much has been done over the years to try and breathe life into this, both working with individuals in the community, working with some members of the private sector, and more recently with Ashcom to look at other options to try and ensure that the market would remain open. Unfortunately, none of those have proved to be fruitful, and therefore we are recommending that the market is to close on the 21st of December this year. The reason that we're suggesting that it is December is that it would allow the few traders who still attend to benefit from the little trade leading up to Christmas. I think the report highlights that we've had a community interest group in terms of Ashcom who had initially intended to take on the market after we'd said that we would look to close it, and they have ultimately come back with a similar response to what we put forward earlier this year and raised concerns with last year, and that is that Ashbourne really doesn't have the footfall to sustain 2 markets a week. I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thanks, Ash. Councillor Bull.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just one, can you just clarify for everybody's sake that
the transfer of the market on the Thursday does not incur any funding being given to Ashcombe.
Chair, I can confirm that the proposals that were put forward in February involved a £10,000 support grant to Ashcombe if they were to take on the Thursday and the Saturday market because of the costs associated primarily to the Saturday market. Ashcombe have accepted that none of those funds will be received for the transfer of the Thursday market.
Councillor Bull, are you moving the recommendation?
Yes, I would like to move it. I'd like to move it, but I'm afraid it's with a heavy heart due to the fact that we are going to lose Saturday. But there has been a lot of work, as I know, with Ash and Dave and other people, you know, myself and the other ward members of Ashbourne, trying to go and see how things could be put in place and looked into. Obviously, Ashcombe came over and they were only interested in taking the Saturday, but obviously the work that they've done have realised that that wasn't going to be the case, and so obviously now we've come down to that they will take the licence for the Thursday. Hopefully the Thursday market will thrive under that, but obviously it's under Ashcombe for their organising and help and advice from them rather than being funded to do that, as Ash has just confirmed. And hopefully in the future Ashbourne on a Saturday might get a market back if somebody's got some ideas, or the future changes with trade all around, because as we all know, everywhere seems to be shutting down. So I would propose that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Purdy.
Thank you, Chair. I'd second that. I mean, isn't it a pity we can't bottle Bakewell market and understand what the success of that is? And there are other examples around the country, Leyburn and other places. For the benefit of new members, this has been a many years long process. We've done 2 scrutiny committees over the years. I was involved with 1. Some of those recommendations have proved productive. The move out of the bus station into Crown Head, Worksworth is starting to lift a little bit, but we've never cracked Ashbourne. Ashbourne has been a particular problem. There's been upstarts before and they failed. And as a result of the loss of Waitrose and Bennett's store in Ashbourne recently, a problem not unique to Ashbourne, but the closure of high street shops in the country, the ward members approached me several weeks ago and I agreed to meet the traders in Ashbourne. And in that dialogue I also asked for a delay for the closure of the market from October date to Christmas, to allow them to have the last Christmas fling. And so we met with the traders last night in Ashbourne. 85 people turned up. It was a very interesting meeting, upon which I will report later on. Interestingly, I spoke to one of the market stall owners and he fully understood the reasons why the Saturday market had to close. And so, as Councillor Bull says, it is with a sad heart, but it's down to the people. It's down to internet shopping. It's down to the fact that they're not patronising the high street anymore. They're not patronising stall markets anymore. And it's a change in the sign of the times. So we've done our best. Our officers have done the best. I know a lot of work's been done into this. So I'll second it, Chair, and move the recommendation.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Wakeman.
Yes, at a later stage, could we reconsider that if it was to come up? If the markets were to thrive again, could we look at it at a later stage? Or once it's shut, will it be shut for good?
I think we have options, Chair, depending on what proposal comes forward. Previously, we have trialled monthly artisan markets. We already have specialist markets. So if somebody wanted to come forward to put on a specialist market, we could consider that under the current event strategy. If somebody wanted to introduce a weekly market, I think there needs to be a strong business case, which we would put forward to members for consideration.
Thank you.
Councillor Ratcliffe.
Thank you, Chair. I can concur with all the comments I've heard. Ashbourne, like Wirksworth and Matlock, was established by Royal Charter. Wirksworth market has been going almost continuously for 800 years, believe it or not. And once these markets go, they are very difficult to restore. Ash, in fact, has alluded to the question I was going to ask, which I'm sure is a question far too late to be entertaining, but I wondered about the idea of the farmers' market, which has proved a great success in Wirksworth. Gary mentions, bottling Bakewell's success. Well, to a lesser degree, I have to say, but nevertheless, Wirksworth has shown that is an attractive stall market venture, and it's been going very well. And one just wonders, is there something unique, perhaps, to the customer base in Ashbourne that wouldn't allow it to flourish? I don't know.
I could probably talk about this for hours, Chair, to be honest. I think the bottom line is, Councillor Ratcliffe, there isn't a golden ticket, and we've spent a number of years looking at different markets, and I'm glad Councillor Purdy actually points out Bakewell, because Bakewell is still one of the most successful markets in the country. But that's also supported by the fact that there's a cattle market that continues to take place on a Monday, and it brings a lot of visitors to the town. I'm told that Ashbourne also used to be a thriving market on a Saturday when the cattle market was there. That's had a huge impact on the footfall coming into the town. There's also other markets local to relatively local to Ashbourne that take place on a Saturday. And dare I say it, sometimes we're criticised for using the car parks for markets, and the challenge, as you would have heard from Ashcombe before, was they didn't want to lose the marketplace. We also see that actually some markets thrive because there's car parking available. So there are so many different factors that make it difficult to get, like I say, a golden ticket, and we have to treat each one individually.
Thank you.
Councillor O'Brien.
Yes, Chair. I echo the sentiments of colleagues about the demise of a long-standing market. I note that Ashbourne remains, the revival of Ashbourne as a market town remains one of our corporate priorities. Can we be reassured that in the light of the problems being experienced by the markets there, that we will at some stage get some proposals as to how that corporate priority is going to be taken forward in the future?
Councillor Purdy.
Perhaps I can help there, Councillor O'Brien. As I said, we will bring the sort of flavour, if I put it that way, of the meeting last night in future to some future point or committee. But there were a number of positives coming out of last night, besides the attack upon the reasons for the footfall. Predominantly car parking charges and predominantly the HGV congestion through the town. The fact is that in 2007, led by Ashbourne Partnership, this council was involved with a very heavy research into Ashbourne, and I produced that document last night to show, sadly, that none of the recommendations had been followed through. But, as I say, there were some positives, and there were 2 or 3 traders there last night who picked up the flag and the banner at my request, if they pull together and form either a town team or a chamber of commerce and produce a community interest company, perhaps even to set on a town manager. So we've cemented some ideas. And yes, we do fully intend to put some extra effort into Ashbourne. There's the park to consider, there's the Bantam to consider, and I know that the ward members are looking for, in this next term, a green flag award for the park. So, yes.
I have no other speakers. It has been moved and seconded. All in favour?
Unanimous.
Thank you. Thank you to all for attending, and thank you for viewers for sticking with us if you have done. Thank you. Oh, initial each. Front and back. Sorry, one side.
Yeah.
Oh,